Alright, so today we are going to be working on a MacBook that appears to have been abused by another facility. But before we get started on that repair, let me just remind you that everything we do here has been made possible by your support of store.rossmangroup.com, the one sponsor that has stuck with us through thick and thin, who has stayed with us when our video has been demonetized, or when a video has been considered controversial, or when I have said something that people don't like. The one sponsor that has always been there is store.rossmangroup.com. Because I own it. And as you can see over here, store.rossmangroup.com has become even more dedicated to ensuring that you get the parts you need at the prices you deserve. The Quick 861DW Hot Air Rework Station is down to $254.99 and free shipping. You will not find this price anywhere else because we have managed to negotiate a better price on them by buying hundreds and hundreds of them and screaming at them for not meeting manufacturing deadlines faster than Tim Cook screams at a Chinese person that hasn't built enough iPhone 10s fast enough for $1 an hour. That is true. In this point, we have the best pricing on many of these items. We have chips for iPhone, iPod, iPad, MacBook, and then some. We have ultrasonic cleaners. We got the best prices on solder paste. We got the best prices on flux. We have the best selection of all of these items. And starting today, we have not just one employee, but we have 2 new employees whose sole job it is to make sure that things on store.rossmangroup.com are in stock, are shipped quickly, and that your questions are answered. Are you sick and tired of dealing with the fact that when you have a problem with your order, that your email goes to my cell phone while I'm on a bike riding my bafang? No more. We have 2 full-time staff members that do nothing but ensure that your store.rossmangroup.com experience is everything it should be. So don't delay. Buy today. Now, with that being said, we are going to get started on an abused little MacBook. Let's go over this. I have a mid-2014 MacBook Pro bought in January of 2015. It needed a trackpad replacement in May 2015, and I took it to a local shop. When I got it back, the fan ran consistently high. I took it back, and they spent 1 to 2 months trying to correct this. 1 to 2 months. And then sending to Florida headquarters for a system board replacement. When I got it back, they said it was fixed, but they had only installed the fan regulation software to manage the fan speed, and didn't tell me. I was moving at the time and didn't test the laptop until over a month later. And so I tried to reinstall, tried some advice online to no avail. I've just had it in a laptop case since. I'd like to have the system overall assessed, if possible, so that I can know what it would cost to fix the trackpad, system board, max fan issue, and anything else that needs updating. Also, filled in the form to send this in, but forgot to include notes that the machine always runs terribly slowly, even when one app is running. If you have been watching this channel for a while, then you probably understand that this type of issue on this machine, when it's running really slowly and the fan spinning high, is likely a sensor issue. MacBooks have more sensors than almost any other machine. And instead of telling you, hey, this sensor is not working, what happens when the sensor is reporting something silly is that the machine just starts to work like shit. And instead of having 4 or 5 or 6 sensors, these things have like 14 or 30. So it can be a bit of a pain in the ass. So this machine, even though it was purchased in January 2015, is actually a 2013 model. So what you can do with these machines, since they have the older board, is you can run something called the Apple Service Diagnostic. This is something that you used to be able to find somewhere on the dark corners of the internet, but you can't find that anymore because now you need to use something called GSX to diagnose sensor failures. Before, you could just go online, get a copy of this thing, you could run it, and it would tell you the sensor that failed. Now you can only have access to that if you plug the machine in, you log in with your Apple credentials, and run that specific test for that specific machine. Apple has gotten so Gestapo with this crap that if you simply want to know which sensor in your machine has failed, you must go through an Apple authorized service provider that, wait, there's more, will not fix your motherboard. So the people that have access to the tool that will let you know which sensor has failed are the same people that will not fix your motherboard. Apple. Now, luckily I got myself access to this little tool because, again, here we specialize in giving the middle finger to all those policies that say that third-party authorized repair don't get access to this stuff. So let's take a look at this MacBook. We're going to go over to my overhead camera. Now, the first sign that your machine has been worked on by a set of dumbasses, besides the fact that they put software to redo the fans, is that the battery is flopping out. What the fuck is this? When you replace the trackpad, you remove the original adhesive. Not leave this shit there, and then put new good adhesive. This is bullshit. The battery, look, what the fuck is this? What is this? This is garbage. Don't do this. It's terrible. Awful. Ugh. Now, the software for the fans is somewhat understandable, and let me explain why I think that is before we really dig in and get started here. So there are certain machines, like there are certain iMacs, where if you do not use a hard drive that came with the machine, the fan will run fast all the time. So what you can do is you can either put software there to disable that sensor, or what you can do is you can mess with the sensor or short the two pins of the sensor together. So I understand why in some cases people would feel inclined to mess around or not do the proper fix, because the proper fix would require you putting in a hard drive that was designed, 10 years ago or 8 years ago into the computer. And obviously with something like a hard drive that's kind of like a tire with wear and tear, you don't want to do that. And the way Apple designs these machines, very often you are forced to find these workarounds. And I explained that to this customer when he called and live chatted, that sometimes stores do need to look for these workarounds because there's just no solution to it. This machine here is not one where that is the case. You have the tool here. There's no sensors in this machine that cannot be replaced. You can happily grab stuff off a donor board. So here I've run something called the Apple Service Diagnostic. And in the Apple Service Diagnostic, I can go to Hardware Profile, Display Hardware Profile, and it will give me a list of sensors. So if we look at this hardware profile and we look at the list of sensors, what you'll see is that we have a couple of funky things here. Now over here you see TGOD, GPU die analog temp, reading minus 124 Celsius. So that's a sensor that has obviously failed. GPU die digital temp, minus 124 Celsius. That is another sensor that has obviously failed. It says TH1H, right fin stack temperature, minus 124 Celsius, and left fin stack temp TH2H, minus 124 Celsius. So what we have to do here is I've written down all these temperature sensors with my beautiful handwriting that you can see here, and we're going to look through the schematic of the 820-3787 board that's in this machine to try to get an idea of what these have in common. Because there's no, oh, just replace the sensor IC kind of thing going on here. I want to figure out what these have in common to see if there's a specific line, a specific chip, a specific resistor, or something that may be fucked up here. So the first thing that we're going to do is go through the schematic and the board view for an 820-3787 board using Paul Daniels' Flex board view software that you should check out at pldaniels.com. Don't delay. Buy today. Don't delay. Subscribe today. Don't delay. Get get Flex board view. Get everything that I shill. And just be grateful that I don't subject you to LastPass shilling. LastPass offered me $3,500 for one shout out in one video. $3,500. And yet still, the only thing that I shill is store.rossmangroup.com, because I have faith in store.rossmangroup.com. I stand behind store.rossmangroup.com. And let's go over where we have sensors that talk to one another. Here we go. I see sensor chips. So this is CPU thermal sensor, not it. Airflow proximity, no. Now remember, our sensors that are failed are GPU die, GPU proximity, GPU die analog, GPU die digital, left fin stack, right fin stack. So what combines all these? So here we have, check this out, GPU proximity, check, GPU die, check, left fin stack, check, right fin stack, check. So we don't have an individual sensor that's failed. It's not like left fin stack is reading 30 Celsius and this one's reading minus 24. All of them are reading that. So what do they all have in common? They all have in common this data line, this chip, R5850 feeding at a power source. So it could be R5850 that's at fault. It could be this capacitor shorting that's a ground after it. It could be something on this data line pulling it down. It could be U5850 that's bad. I don't know. But what I do know is that that is going to be suspect number one. So I am going to take the board out of this MacBook, and we're going to go from there. LastPass is good, though. It could be good. The thing with the LastPass people is that they wanted me to make my video, unlist it, show it to them for approval, then if they approve, wait till it gets a certain amount of views, then after that pay me. To which I politely said, go fuck yourself. How about you pay me in advance, I make the video that I want to make, you deal with it. I love when people say, hey, we want to reach out to you, but we want to set all the terms of the... No. So I'm looking for U5850. And if you buy Flex Board View at pldaniels.com, you right-click on the chip, and it just brings you to where it is. Is that not beautiful? Is that not amazing? So we're going to look at that chip and see if there's anything there that gives us cause for concern. And when we look at the chip that is responsible for all of this, kind of looks fine, actually. So we have our 5850, which is supposed to be supplying it with 3.3 volts. This is supposed to be 47 ohms, and that resistor is measuring 47 ohms. So we don't have a problem with that, most likely. Let's see if the data line is shorted to ground. So the data line is going to be on pins 9 and 10. See? Data line. I can just right-click on this, and Paul Daniels' software will instant. Paul Daniels' software, when I right-click, will instantly show it on the board. Ah, fuck it. All right, Paul Daniels' software is a fucking steaming pile of shit right there. No, I'm kidding. So the Apple engineers, what they do is they'll use a different name in the schematic than they do in the board view, and there's no reason for it. So see over here it says SMBus _ SMC _ SO whatever, and over here it says SMBus _ GPU ThermSense. That's actually the same thing, but because they decided to make it to the schematic, we'll use a different terminology than the board view. And this confuses students a lot, so what you have to do is just look at pin 9 of U5850 here and look at pin 9 of U5850 there, and you'll find it. So what sucks here is that it looks like this chip has virtually no damage on it. So what I was going over before that was, if you look over here, this is the data line. So I want to see if the data line pins are shorted to ground. And if they're not shorted to ground, at that point, we are at a severe disadvantage to figuring this out. So I'm going to go into diode mode, and let's see what I get on each of those pins. And we get 0.710 and 0.709, which is not in any way, shape, or form or short to ground. I'm also going to plug it in and just make sure 3.3 volts is getting to that chip. And if it is, then I'm just going to assume that the chip just so happened to kill itself, even though everything else is fine. Because at that point, that'll be the only thing that I can think of logically that would cause this issue. I also don't understand how this issue could result from the trackpad itself being replaced. I would not blame the store for doing this. You know, this is not going to be some... But just after I went to you, or, you know, since I went to you, no, none of that bullshit. There's no way that this can magically break from replacing a trackpad. This would just so happen to be a very bad coincidence that right after this customer had their trackpad replaced, they had this issue. Or even worse, maybe the customer had this issue before they had the trackpad replaced, and that customer then decided to blame this store, which would be kind of shitty. But again, I don't know the whole story. But just to be clear, this is not something that could ever occur or result from replacing a trackpad. This would just have, if that chip failed in that manner, it would just be purely bad luck that caused that to occur. Now, it could also be something that's pulling it down. The SMC is going to talk to the FinStack temperature sensor, the GPU temperature sensor, and J4002, which is the webcam. I'm going to take a guess that rather than the chip being bad, that the actual webcam is bad, and that the webcam is pulling this shit down. Let's see if that's the case. So what I'm going to try doing is I am going to try plugging in everything in the machine, plugging in the webcam, and then seeing if the diode mode measurement goes down when the webcam is plugged in. I'm also going to try rerunning that Apple Service Diagnostic with the webcam not plugged in, and we will go from there. So let's plug this in with the webcam, because that is actually much more likely. It's more likely that something is wrong with the webcam than that chip just randomly decided to shit itself, even though it looks totally fine. And again, to be clear, there's no way that replacing a trackpad would do this. As much as I think it is shitty that a store would install a battery like this, as crappy as I think this is, I cannot blame them for this issue. Because that, you know, I wouldn't want somebody blaming me for that issue, because God knows I get blamed for enough shit that I didn't actually cause. It's like I literally hired a full-time person just to deal with the shit that we get blamed for that we didn't do. Like that guy on the weekend installed LibreOffice on my computer, and ever since he did that, I get flickering lines. Did you buy a 2011 MacBook with the GPU recall program? Yes, I did, but... Okay, do you understand that installing LibreOffice is not going to kill your GPU? Well, no, but yes, but ever since he touched it. Okay, then, well, there's not... like, I've hired a person that really does that for like 8 hours a fucking day, 5 to 6 days a week. Like, that's a job now. So, you know, if I don't want it to happen to me, can't blame other. I can blame him for this. I can't blame him for the sensor thing. Because originally what I thought when the customer said that this person came in and had their trackpad replaced and then the sensor was failing, I thought, oh, they put in a shitty trackpad or they don't know that there's a sensor in the trackpad. Because do keep in mind, TS0P, that palm rest temperature sensor is not actually in the palm rest, it's in the trackpad. So if you install the wrong trackpad, or not even wrong, if you mess up installing it, or you install a broken trackpad, which I suppose would be the wrong trackpad, you don't want to give somebody a broken one, then you can cause this issue. But the sensors that are failing have absolutely nothing to do with the trackpad. So I don't want to blame the store that was not responsible for that. They are responsible for losing the screws, they are responsible for the battery, and they are responsible for the fact that after 2 months, they lack the ability to solve this problem. That's fucking shameful. But they didn't cause this. So I'm going to plug in the fans. Remember, we're plugging in everything besides the webcam. I want to see if the webcam does it. And if the webcam does it, then you're not getting a webcam. Because this is not a screen that you can take apart to get to the webcam. If you take apart that screen, it's done for. It's kaput. You can't remove the screen to get to the webcam. That is a ridiculously delicate screen, and the moment you remove it, it is cracked into bits and pieces, which is absolutely not worth it to get to the webcam. You can buy some $20 webcam online. All right, so we're loading up this beautiful test operating system here, and let's see what it says on the sensor issues. So let's test the sensors and see what it finds. DC in and BMON are not working now. The SSD sensor is not working because there's no SSD plugged in, but as you can see, the left fin stack is working, the right fin stack is working, and the GPU sensors are working. Now the ones that don't work, the ones that are reading incorrectly, those actually don't matter. I know this sounds silly, but DC in test, who gives a shit? That's not, you know, the DC in sensor is not reading right because I don't have a charger plugged in. I don't give a shit about that. I don't care. It's not sensing the proper voltage because I don't have the charger plugged in. I'm running off the battery. Battery monitor, I don't care about that. So this here, GPU sensors are reading within operating range. And if I go to hardware profile and display hardware profile, and I scroll up to fin stack, God, this is frustrating. I hate working in EFI mode. Here we go. So fin stack temperature, it says 44 Celsius. The other fin stack is 58 Celsius. GPU, 61 Celsius. Die, 75 Celsius. Analog die, 69 Celsius. Just change the ISO on the camera so it's easier for you to see that. Yeah, so all of those sensors are fine. So every issue that we were having with this machine was caused by the fact that the webcam is at fault. And this. So now let's just confirm that. Now I want to plug this in and show you how the multimeter reading is actually different. So 8 and 9. Pins 8 and 9 are going to be the pins responsible for that. So I'm going to plug in the webcam, and I'm curious if those get shorted to ground. Maybe it only gets shorts to ground when the machine's turned on, but I'm just curious to see what the result is that I get here. Now, before we had 0.71 something and 0.70 something. Oh, touching the heatsink is hot. And now we get 0.006. And here we get 0.670. Now watch what happens when I unplug the webcam. We got 0.006, right? Well, with the webcam not plugged in, we get 0.678 and 0.678. So as you can see, it's easy to prove here that the webcam is what's pulling that data line down. And because the webcam's pulling that data line down, every sensor on that data line is failing. If you were to simply replace the sensor chip, you would be screwing yourself. I get that in my chat. I get that in the forum. I get that in phone calls all the time. How much to replace my sensor chip? And the reason I don't answer that question, and the reason I refuse to do it, and the reason I occasionally get one-star reviews from people that say, I asked him to replace my sensor, and he said he wouldn't replace my sensor 1 star, is because I don't know if that's the problem. If I replace your sensor, and you want to pay only $50 because you diagnosed it yourself, and I replace your sensor, and it doesn't work, are you still going to pay me? No. Over here, you see that the SMC is going to speak to the left and right fin stack temperature sensor, which also has the GPU temperature sensor on that line. This is going to, all these things share one data line. So if anything on this line is shorting it to ground, you're not going to get any data. So what these two resistors over here do, R5350 and R5351, they are going to pull this line up so that it's always 3.3 volts. So over here on this side, you have 3.3 volts, and on the other side of the resistor, you'll have 3.3 volts. Now, when these chips want to speak to the SMC, what they do is they will short the line to ground for short periods of time. And think of it like Morse code. So when you have Morse code, you have, you know, beep, 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 beep. Now here, it's kind of like the same thing. Every time the chip wants to talk, it's going to press the button down, or in this case, it's going to short the signal to ground, and it's going to go to 0. But then when it doesn't short it to ground, it goes back up to 3. So you're going to have a little waveform. And think of the waveform kind of like handwriting. This is how the chip's going to write. So the chip's going to write to the other chip. It's going to go 30, 30, 30, 30, but there has to be that 3 there. If there's something that is permanently shorting it to ground, it's always at 0. So if even only one of the chips on that line is shorted to ground all the time, none of the other chips will be able to speak to each other because it's not going to be writing. It's just going to be bam. And you can see this on an oscilloscope, and you can see it in my older videos in sensor chips where you can actually see what the waveform looks like. There's not going to be any waveform. And here there's no waveform because the webcam, this little plug here, is pulling everything down and causing it to not work. The webcam is at fault here. So while the store that sent this machine in clearly does not know how to put half of the screws back in the computer, does not know how to diagnose a problem, and does not know how to glue in a battery, they're not at fault for this one. It just so now, how does this fail? Well, you'll have to ask Apple. Also, why is it that Apple makes a computer where the webcam having an issue will make the entire computer too slow to work properly? Think different. Think different. Yeah, the webcam's not working properly? Oh yeah, your computer's going to run at 800 megahertz and the fans are going to spin at 6,000 RPM. That's just the magic and the beauty of Apple engineering. At the very least, I hope this was an educational video. I very much so appreciate the individual that decided to trust us and send us this computer. Thank you very much for sending it in. I really appreciate that. Can't you just disconnect the data lines? Actually, I could. Huh. You're right. I could cut off the connection on the webcam. Yeah, I could cut the pins on the board on the webcam for the data line, because that's only used for the ambient light sensor. So you know how the machine's able to tell whether or not to turn the keyboard backlight on or off? That's done by the ambient light sensor, and the ambient light sensor is built into the webcam, and that speaks to the SMC on the same data line as the left and right fin stack temperature sensors and the GPU temperature sensors. Why a data line is being shared between GPU temperature sensors and heatsink temperature sensors and a light sensor is beyond me, because they have different ways of dealing with failure. If a temperature sensor fails, turn the fans on and slow down the processor. Makes sense. If a light sensor fails, who gives a fuck, you know? It's not like the end of the world. You don't have to change the way the entire system operates for that. So for me, it would seem to make more sense for those two things to be on separate data lines, because one is mission critical while the other is not.